Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Human girl gave the deadliest alien dragon her last $10 but didn't know it would thank her. The streets of New Haven were alive with the clamor of merchants calling out their wares, the rhythmic clatter of hover bikes weaving through narrow alleys, and the ever-present hum of neon signs flickering above the marketplace. It was a city of contrasts, where wealth and power towered in shimmering spires while, below, the forgotten and desperate struggled to carve out their existence in the shadows. Era walked among the crowd, her fingers curled tightly around the last $10 bill she had to her name. It wasn't much, barely enough for a single meal, but she held it as if it carried the weight of her survival. Her stomach ached with hunger, and the thought of fresh bread or even a cheap protein bar gnawed at her mind. But then she saw it. Huddled in a darkened alley between two towering buildings, beneath the sickly glow of a flickering, hollow ad, was a creature unlike anything she had ever seen before. Its small body trembled, its scales dulled with grime, its once majestic wings folded tight against its sides, and its golden eyes, clouded with exhaustion, blinked up at her. A dragon, a baby dragon. All her breath caught in her throat. Dragons weren't unheard of, but they were rare, nearly mythical in this part of the galaxy. They were creatures of legend, beings of wisdom and power that roamed the skies of the frontier worlds, cloth-free and untouchable. But this one was neither free nor powerful, it was starving. A weak, pitiful sound escaped its throat, something between a whimper and a plea. It lifted its head slightly, as if begging, and felt something deep inside her break. She knelt beside it, hesitating only for a moment before pulling the crumpled bill from her pocket. "Here," she whispered, reaching out, "it's all I have, but maybe it'll help." The dragon stared at her, unmoving, as if trying to comprehend her gesture. Then, slowly, it extended a trembling claw and took the money, gripping it delicately as if it were something precious. A soft glow flickered through its scales for the briefest moment, and then, with a final, weary look at Era, it slunk away into the shadows, vanishing into the maze of alleyways. Era remained kneeling, staring after it long after it was gone. She had no idea why she had done it, no logical reason to give away her last bit of money to a creature that might not even understand what it was, but deep down, she hoped that somewhere, somehow, that little dragon would be okay. And then, forcing herself to her feet, she turned and walked away, never expecting to see it again. The following days passed in a blur of empty stomachs and restless thoughts, a hunger not just for food, but for certainty, for some reassurance that she hadn't made a mistake. Had the dragon found shelter? Had it been able to trade the money for food? Or had it simply been another lost soul swallowed by the endless void of the city? She found herself lingering near the alley where she had last seen it, but the space remained empty, its secret swallowed by the neon haze of New Haven's lower districts. Life moved on as it always did. Era worked odd jobs where she could, scraping together enough to keep herself afloat. But the memory of that night, the pleading golden eyes, the trembling claws accepting her last $10, never left her. She thought about it less as the years passed, but it never truly faded. Decades later, when the galaxy had long since pulled her into its greater tides, when she had become more than the hungry girl on the streets of New Haven, she had all but convinced herself it had been nothing more than a fleeting act of kindness, that the dragon was gone, that it had never mattered, until one day it returned. 30 years had passed, the neon lights of New Haven had dimmed, and Era's memory was replaced by the vast, endless expanse of the galaxy. She had traveled far beyond the streets she once knew, carving out a life for herself as a xenobiologist studying the creatures that roamed the uncharted worlds. She had seen things people only whispered about, beasts that could disappear into shadow, serpents that swam through clouds, creatures that spoke not with words but with color. She had devoted her life to understanding them, protecting them, ensuring that their existence would not be forgotten. And yet, of all the creatures she had encountered, there was one she had never been able to find again, the little dragon. She had told herself time and again that it was a childhood memory, nothing more than a moment of kindness lost to time, a single act that had mattered only for a breath, and then faded like mist in the morning light. But then one night everything changed. Era had been stationed on a research vessel orbiting a newly discovered exoplanet deep in the galactic frontier. The air buzzed with anticipation. New life had been detected on the surface, something big, something unlike anything recorded before. She stood at the observation deck, watching the storm-laced skies of the planet below, when a deep, resonant hum filled the air. It wasn't the ship, it wasn't a malfunction, it was something outside. A shadow moved against the stars, vast and graceful, blotting out the light of a distant sun. Something was coming. Then a voice, ancient, powerful, yet achingly familiar, echoed through the calm, "You gave me everything when I had nothing. It is time I returned the favor." Era's breath caught in her throat. No, it couldn't be. The ship trembled as the massive form descended, landing upon the research deck with a grace that defied its size. The crew scrambled, sensors blared warnings, but Era stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The dragon was nothing like the frail, shivering creature she had once met in the alley. This being was magnificent. Its scales gleamed like polished obsidian threaded with veins of molten gold. Its wings stretched wide, powerful enough to command the winds. Its golden eyes, the same ones that had once begged for help in the darkness, now burned with the wisdom of ages. Era's heart pounded as the great beast lowered its head, its breath warm against her skin. "I never forgot." The words resonated through her bones, vibrating in the very air around her. Era swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper, "It was you." The dragon rumbled softly, a sound not of menace but of something far deeper. "Recognition?" "I don't understand," Era said, shaking her head. "How, why?" The dragon folded its wings, its eyes never leaving hers. "You saved me when the universe had abandoned me. You gave me your last when I had nothing. You were the only kindness I had ever known." Era felt her throat tighten. She had been a child, a single act of compassion long forgotten by the world. Yet here it stood before her, as undeniable as the air she breathed. The dragon's gaze softened. "I am not the only one who remembers. The stars do too." Then, with deliberate care, it extended one massive claw. Clutched between its talons was something small, something impossibly familiar, a $10 bill, crumpled, old, but still intact. Era stared, her vision blurred. All these years, all this time, it had kept it. A laugh broke from her lips, shaky and disbelieving. She reached out, her fingers brushing the worn paper. "You didn't have to come back," she whispered. "But I did," the dragon said, "because kindness is never forgotten." All stood in the shadow of the great dragon, her pulse hammering in her throat. The $10 bill, worn and faded, rested in her trembling hands. It was impossible. The logic of time and space screamed that this moment shouldn't exist, that something so small, so insignificant, should have been lost to history. And yet here it was. Here he was, the dragon, grown beyond anything she could have imagined, watched her with knowing eyes. The same golden gaze that had once pleaded for help now held something far deeper. "You kept it," she whispered, the words barely making it past her lips. "It was never just money," the dragon rumbled, his voice a melody of distant thunder and old stars. "It was hope. It was the first kindness I had ever known, and I swore that one day I would return it." Era swallowed hard. "I never expected anything back, you looked like you needed it more than I did." The dragon inclined his head slightly. "And that is why it mattered." A gust of warm wind curled around her as he shifted his wings, folding against his back. From the satchel secured along his sides, crafted from star-woven silk shimmering in the artificial light, he pulled something else, a small, unassuming chest, pulsing faintly as though it contained the heartbeat of the cosmos itself. He placed it before her with delicate care. "This is my gift to you, Era." She hesitated before kneeling, pressing her palms against the cool, metallic lid. It hummed under her touch, warmth seeping into her fingers. With a deep breath, she lifted the cover. Inside, nestled among strands of woven starlight, lay an array of crystalline vials filled with a shimmering substance unlike anything she had ever seen. The liquid shifted, defying the laws of matter, sometimes dense like mercury, sometimes weightless as light. Era's breath caught. "Is this?" The dragon nodded. "Life essence, harvested from the heart of dying stars, imbued with the energy of creation itself. With it, you can heal wounds beyond medicine, extend the lives of those on the brink, restore what was thought to be lost." Era's hands trembled as she touched one of the vials, feeling the immense power thrumming inside. The weight of the gift settled deep in her chest. This could change everything. It could save millions. "That is my intent," the dragon said softly. "Your kindness saved one life. Now let it save many." Era clenched her jaw, emotion swelling thick in her throat. "I don't know how to repay this." The dragon huffed, his eyes gleaming with something close to amusement. "You already did, 30 years ago." The research crew had gathered outside the docking bay, their eyes wide with disbelief as they watched the impossible unfold. Some whispered theories of ancient guardian races, of celestial beings who walked between realms, others simply stared, unable to comprehend the sheer size and majesty of the dragon standing before them. All barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the being in front of her, the creature she had once given her last $10 to, now standing tall, offering her a gift that could change the course of history. But she wasn't thinking about the gift, she was thinking about him. She stepped forward, ignoring the murmurs around her, and pressed a hand to the dragon's enormous snout. His breath, warm and steady, washed over her fingers. For a moment, they simply existed in silence, two souls bound by a single act of kindness across time. Then softly she whispered, "What's your name?" The dragon blinked, as though surprised by the question. Then he let out a deep, resonant sound that wasn't quite a word but something far older, a name in a language not spoken by tongues but by the wind and the stars. Era's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "That's a little hard to pronounce. Mind if I call you Aurelian?" A low, approving rumble echoed through his chest. "A fitting name," he mused. "A name I will wear with pride." Era exhaled, stepping back. "So what now? You fulfilled your promise. You could go anywhere, do anything." Aurelian studied her for a long moment before lowering his head slightly. "I have watched you from afar, seen the way you have spent your life helping those who cannot help themselves. That is a path I understand well. If you would allow it, I would walk it with you." Era's breath hitched. He was asking, not demanding, not claiming her debt, but offering. She looked down at the chest of life essence, at the countless lives it could save, at the futures it could restore. Then she looked back at Aurelian, at the golden eyes she had never truly forgotten. A slow smile spread across her lips. "Then, let's get to work." The engines of the Starchaser hummed softly beneath Era's feet as she stood on the observation deck, staring out at the endless void. The research station had long since faded into the distance, its light swallowed by the vastness of space. Aurelian's colossal form moved beside the ship, his wings outstretched, gliding effortlessly through the currents of the cosmos like a being born from the stars themselves. Era exhaled, feeling the weight of her decision settle into her bones. This was no longer just her journey, it was theirs. The legendary dragon, who had once been a starving child in an alley, now soared alongside her, a protector, an ally, a friend. The life essence he had given her sat secure in the ship's cargo hold, a gift that could alter the future of medicine, of life itself. But it wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a promise, a ripple of kindness echoing across time, returning to change the universe. She turned from the viewport, stepping toward the command console where star maps flickered with dozens of coordinates. Some were distress signals, some were dying worlds, some were places that had long been forgotten. Aurelian's deep, rumbling voice filled the calm, his tone thoughtful. You hesitate. Era huffed a small laugh, shaking her head. I don't even know where to start. After a pause, then with quiet certainty, she said, wherever you go, I will follow. She smiled, reaching for the controls. Then, let's go help someone else who needs it. Aurelian gave a low, approving hum. Then, in one fluid motion, he folded his wings and propelled himself forward, his form cutting through the darkness like a streak of golden light. The Starchaser's engines roared to life, and together, human and dragon disappeared into the unknown. Their first destination was a planet on the brink of collapse. Verith 9 was once a lush, thriving colony, but years of industrial strain had left its environment choking in poisonous fumes, its rivers dry, its people sick from the very air they breathed. The distress call had been weak, barely detectable among the hundreds of signals cluttering the galactic channels, but Era had heard it, and she had answered. The ship touched down in the heart of the colony. The landing bay filled with weary faces, they were sick, their skin tinged with the toxic effects of long-term exposure to the polluted air. The medical staff that remained had long since run out of resources. Era wasted no time, she retrieved the vials of life essence, working alongside the colony's doctors to administer doses to the worst cases first. The transformation was almost immediate, where once lungs rattled with every breath, now oxygen flowed freely, where once bodies withered, strength returned. The impossible was happening before their eyes. And above them, Aurelian circled the skies, his golden eyes scanning for danger. It didn't take long for the wrong people to notice. A convoy of off-world enforcers descended from the upper atmosphere, corporate-backed soldiers, the kind that didn't believe in charity, only in profits. They had let this planet rot for years, squeezing the last of its resources dry, and now they saw something valuable, something they wanted to own. Their leader stood firm as he approached, his armored boots clanking against the platform. That's a very expensive tier you've got there, he said, his voice dripping with casual menace. Era didn't flinch. It's not for sale, she said. The enforcer smirked, signaling to his men, that's not up to you. The air shifted. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the sky, sending a ripple of unease through the gathered soldiers. A smirk on the enforcer's face faltered as a massive shadow passed overhead. Aurelian landed behind Era with earth-shaking force, his wings folding against his back. His molten gold eyes locked onto the enforcer, and when he spoke, his voice was the storm before the strike. She said, "It's not for sale." The soldiers hesitated, hands twitching toward their weapons. Era felt a strange sense of calm as she stepped forward, placing a hand against Aurelian's side. "I don't think you understand what's happening here," she said, her voice steady. "You're not in control anymore." For the first time in his life, the enforcer looked afraid, and he had every reason to be. The enforcer's smirk had long since vanished. His men shifted uneasily, fingers hovering over their weapons, but no one dared move. The air itself felt heavier, charged with something primal, something ancient. Aurelian's presence was an unspoken warning, his golden eyes locked onto the enforcer with a patience that was more terrifying than any immediate threat. Era didn't step back. She had spent too many years watching people like this take and take, hoarding power, deciding who deserved to live and who was expendable. But she wasn't a child on the streets of New Haven anymore, and she wasn't alone. "You have two choices," she said, her voice even, "walk away or make a mistake you can't take back." The enforcer's jaw clenched. His ego wouldn't let him back down, not in front of his men. "You think one dragon is going to stop us?" he sneered. Aurelian exhaled a deep, rolling sound that sent vibrations through the platform. His wings unfurled slightly, casting long shadows over the gathered soldiers. "One dragon," he said in a low, rich voice, "you assume I am alone." A sharp breeze swept through the colony, and in the distance, the sky darkened. At first, it seemed like a storm front rolling in fast, but then the shapes became clearer, dozens of massive figures moving as one, their glowing scales flashing against the clouds. The sky was filled with dragons. The enforcer's face paled. His men took uncertain steps backward, hands twitching at their weapons, but there was no fight to be won here, no force in the universe could stand against what was coming. Aurelian took a step forward, the platform beneath him groaning under his weight. "Leave," he commanded. The enforcer swallowed hard, turned sharply on his heel, and signaled to his troops to fall back. The soldiers hesitated only a second before obeying, moving quickly toward their ships. Within minutes, the convoy had lifted off, their engines burning hard as they vanished into the sky, fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. A long silence followed. Then, as if the tension had been nothing more than a passing storm, Aurelian let out a satisfied hum and folded his wings neatly against his back. "That was enjoyable," Hera sighed, shaking her head. "You are impossible," he rumbled in amusement, "and yet you keep me around." The colony had been saved, the enforcers wouldn't be back, not with the sky belonging to dragons. For the next several days, Hera worked alongside the people of Varith 9, ensuring that the life essence was distributed properly, that those who needed it most received it first, while Aurelian remained nearby, though he rarely spoke. He simply watched, his golden eyes following her every move, a silent guardian standing between her and the dangers of the universe. When the last vial had been given, and the colony's future was no longer in immediate peril, Hera stood beside Aurelian at the edge of the platform, staring out at the horizon. "This is only the beginning, isn't it?" she murmured. Aurelian lowered his massive head until his gaze met hers. "It always was," he replied. She turned toward him, placing a hand against his warm scales. "You could go anywhere, do anything. Why stay with me?" The dragon blinked slowly, as if the answer were obvious. "Because kindness does not end with one act, it ripples outward, shaping the future in ways unseen." He tilted his head slightly. "And I wish to see where yours leads." A slow smile spread across her lips. She had given her last $10 to a starving creature in an alley, never expecting anything in return. 30 years later, that kindness had returned to her 1,000-fold. And now, side by side with the greatest being she had ever known, she was ready to change the universe. Together, they would go wherever they were needed, and wherever they went, kindness would follow.